Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, I'm gonna say robot, and loin streamer. And today we're talking about Will Jordan's newest novel, Dark Harvest. There are some opinions to be had on the construction of this book. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do on this channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. Number one way to be featured is through Lemoy, which is the monthly prompt writing contest here on the channel. I give you a prompt, you write a story, submit it first Monday video of the month. We're basking in your greatness. The second way is if you are an indie author and you've got a book out or a book coming out, submit the first chapter and cover down below, and they'll be read on the channel, and hopefully it will help new readers find your content if they're looking for new books to read. The third thing is if you would like to check out any of my books, specifically to rip them, because that's probably what I'm in for after today. They're available at any of your favorite retailers. Please just enjoy as much as you can, however it is you wish to enjoy them. With that said, let's get into the thing. So, Dark Harvest was a book that was read for the Loin stream, and when it was presented, I had no idea that Will Jordan was Critical Drinker. I don't watch Critical Drinker stuff. This is where we're at. I'm wearing an appropriate shirt because the book made me salty from just how bad the construction is. I'm even more salty because this is his 19th book on the market, and 19 books in, and this is what you have done. You've obviously not been studying the craft. You obviously don't care about books. At least that's what comes off to me. I'm not in Will's heart or Will's head or Will's life. But based on the construction of this book, there's no care for it. And I will show you exactly why. I will tell you why I come to that assessment as we go through the story. As always, I'm going to give you a synopsis of the plot, a long synopsis, so you can see what it was, how things are put together, to then make sense of my comments there at the end. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the synopsis. The novel opens up with two prologues that count for approximately 20% of the book. The first prologue is of a young girl climbing a mountain in a storm carrying a special rock that she says people from her village brought back during an expedition. The rock is somehow cursed, and she must return it to its home in the caves of the Death Mountains. As she runs inside of the cave, she trips and slides down into a hole. Then we switch to a 1959 expedition when a bunch of Russian mountain climbers are going on the famous Dyatlov expedition. They end up climbing the wrong mountain, where one man gets curious about a cave that he sees, and so he sneaks in. He falls in the same hole as the girl from the first prologue, sees her dead body over there, and is soon rescued by his buddies. As they go down the mountain and return from whence they came, because they realize they're in the wrong place, they run into a local boy from a tribe that none of them can really communicate with because he doesn't speak Russian and they don't really speak his language. The man who fell into the hole is having a drastic health dip after coming out of the hole, and he's sagging behind. He looks sweaty, he looks feverish, he looks delusional. So by the time they set up camp, he is totally out with a fever, and shortly after that, he mutates into a zombie-like creature and then attacks his buddies. This is when we cut off of the prologues and go straight to the main male character of the novel, Cameron Becker. He is a nearly 40 Army vet who now works in private security in the Middle East after completing 3 tours. He's picking up his newest job, which is delivering a man named Ivanov to some place in Iraq. We're not sure why. We're never really given a reason why he's there, what he's doing there, any of that. It's just he's just there. During the drive, Becker and Ivanov's car is attacked, flipped over, and Ivanov is taken by the attacker. Now, Becker's got to track him down. He arranges his usual team and follows clues to a warehouse that ends up being exploded when they trip a trap, because none of them, despite going on multiple tours and being prepared for this and seeing that there is some under the table stuff going on, and that Becker also has a background with working with people who kind of do under the table stuff, there was no care taken to infiltrating this place with a group of 3 people. So, Becker gets them all killed and then takes a shower, where we did affectionately sing "Dame dame, dame oh, dame oh," and get used to it because it's gonna happen like 4 more times. But of course, Cameron is fine, even though everybody else dies. Don't worry about it. Cameron has plot armor, which is, as we know, the strongest armor in existence. I don't know why the military, the actual American military, has not developed plot armor yet, because you do that, you basically have super soldiers. Let's be real. So, while Cameron is being serviced at an ambulance, he's desperate to find out what happened with that team in that warehouse and who set up that explosion. He wants to know just who he's dealing with. When he goes home, he's met by another Russian man named Golovko, who works for the Russian government and is offering a reward for finding Ivanov and the person who abducted him. It turns out that Ivanov wasn't just a random Russian, but an ex-Soviet scientist, and fairly important to the Russians. Cameron doesn't want to agree to do this job, but the price is too high to deny $10 million for bringing back Ivanov and the guy that kidnapped Ivanov. From there, Becker calls his IT guy Diaz to prepare. After getting with Diaz, Becker visits Jack Turner, a high-ranking officer in Baghdad. He asks for help tracking down the guys who are behind the kidnapping, but Jack is ready to leave the Middle East and retire. During the conversation, Becker sticks a USB into Jack's computer so that Diaz can gank information from it from a distance. Also should be noted that Cameron leaves this USB drive in that computer, so Jack knows that he has been hacked by this guy. That's kind of illegal. Becker. Don't worry though, there are no consequences for Becker breaking all of these laws, by the way. Like, none whatsoever. So now we skip to the introduction of the villain, Vorster, who just announces what he's doing in an internal monologue and that the big test is coming. Because this is the only way that you can possibly know whether it's going to happen, is the bad guy, Direction, has to come in so that you can see directly into his head and tell you what is coming before it comes. As if that doesn't kill suspension, as if that isn't treating the reader like they're idiots. Diaz tells Becker about the guy named Thomas Dill, who was paid to ambush Cameron in that car stop that got Ivanov kidnapped. Don't worry, Thomas Dill never comes up again. When I was doing the synopsis for this, I was like, who the frick is Thomas Dill? How did I forget a whole character? Because he's only mentioned in this one scene. I don't even know why he got a name. He is so unimportant. This is also where Becker learns that Ivanov, his previous cargo, had a whole fake identity, and he was actually a biochemist in Moscow in the 1980s. Then Becker returns to the warehouse/blasting site, where he talks to a couple of local construction men who saw the people who had moved into that warehouse that exploded, and he starts asking them questions of what they know about that guy. The only thing that Becker really understands in that conversation is that they keep saying the word Hanada. And so then Diaz takes the word Hanada and starts investigating that to see where Becker should go next and what is that exactly connected to. From here, we skip over to the leading female character of the novel, Lori Dalton. She's a lead doctor for the World Health Organization working at a refugee camp in Turkey, right next to Syria. As she's working, a man from the Syrian side of the border wanders in saying that he and his troop got in contact with a small village, but when they got there, everyone was dead by something that was not bullets. They had blood coming out of their eyes and foam in their mouths, so Dalton is sure that this is some kind of illness, and being an epidemiologist, she's like, I need to go check this out and see what is going on. So she goes into the tent to call her superior named Kincaid and says, hey Kincaid, I just had this situation presented to me by this random Syrian. Can I organize a team and go check it out? Kincaid says, no, it's too dangerous. We need to check it out ahead of time before we, like with soldiers, before we send anybody over there. However, Dalton, being a girl boss, because she is a girl boss and she's never going to get into trouble for anything that she does, comes out of the tent after her superior says, don't do that, tells everybody around her that, hey, I was given permission to go and do this. Let's create a team and then go check out this village. And then they go check out this village. Don't worry, there are no consequences for this whatsoever, again, so she can just do whatever she wants. So the place that she goes with her small team of 4 turns out later to be Hanada. So while at Hanada, Dalton and her team split up to investigate the different buildings. Here we witness the first zombie attack or outbreak that takes out 2 of her companions and then causes another one to flee as Dalton is chased into a building for cover. While she's sure that she's going to die, she runs into a mysterious action man who is also hiding in the same building just by chance. The 2 of them work together to get out of the roof of the building and set it on fire while they jump onto the roof of another building, and then they flee that town. Just as soon as they escape the village, it is napalmed. Also, Jack Turner's waiting for them and arrests Becker on the spot for his insubordination. As Turner's caravan returns to base, they got stuck on a bridge behind another busted-up car. Here, the group is ambushed in a gunfire fight that leaves more men dead and the car flipped, but Becker is able to run to the trunk of his car under gunfire because he knows that the bad guys want him alive, so they're not actually going to shoot him. And so basically, like, they're under gunfire, and then he just runs out of this Humvee around to the back of the car, grabs out grenades and guns, and the guys with the guns guns are like just shooting around him because they don't want to kill him. They just want to scare him. And he knows this. So he's, again, I swear, plot armor could end all wars because nobody would want to fight soldiers that are covered in plot armor. Dalton, Turner, and Becker get away from this situation more or less unscathed while they leave, more carnage around them. Let's just, another team of damned of people. Well, Dalton asks how they were located by the bad guys. Becker says that's a question for another time, and we never actually get a resolve on this, if I recall correctly. In order to save Becker from the impossible circumstances, we switch over to the perspective of the baddies so that they can inform us somehow Becker managed to call in reinforcements, because if Becker wasn't magically saved without explanation, everything would have been over. This book does this sort of Deus Ex Machina a couple of times, pointing out how something is impossible, but then telling you why it worked out the way that it does to try to pretend that fixed the plot holes. The person who came to the rescue was actually Jacobson. This was the man that had gone to Hanada with Dalton, but had gone running when she went into a different building because they were being chased by zombies. Now, he is an actual soldier, I'm pretty sure, or he's trained. She's just like a doctor for the WHO, but he's got military training of some kind. So he ran when he saw that they were outnumbered, when they were going to die, and that was to get reinforcements. Obviously, he came back. Obviously, he followed her. Obviously, if he didn't do that, she would have been dead or captured by the bad guy. However, Lori Dalton's first response to seeing this man who just came and saved her with reinforcements is to slap him, because she doesn't respect men, because she's a girl boss, because she knows that nobody is going to reprimand her for smacking a man, and never does she apologize. If you watch me on this channel enough, I have other videos where I get so pissed off at this, where it is the women that are just disrespectful assholes, and they never acknowledge at any point that they are out of control, and nobody does. Nobody says, Dalton, Lori, you should not have done that. That is your superior. That is a soldier. You do not hit a man. You do not hit a man that risked his life under you telling lies to get him and his buddies to go on a mission for you that you had no authorization on, that you got those other people killed. You wanted him killed too, and he still came back to save you. And she never says, thank you for that. She never says, I'm sorry I was emotional. That was inappropriate of me. And Becker or Kincaid or Turner, none of them say anything to her slapping this guy. Are you joking? I can't stand it. Which just makes me even more confused that this is a critical drinker, because I know he's on the red pill spectrum, but how do you have a girl boss in your red pill military thing? Is that not something that you are vehemently against? Like, at least there are certain things that I don't expect to find when I go into right-wing content, and Girl Boss is one of them. However, the couple of books that I've read recently that are specifically from more right-wing people have girl bosses in them. So I am just confused. At the site of the battle, because they're still at where the Humvee was like turned over and everything, there is one of the bad guys just sitting on the ground, because obviously they defeated the bad guys. And they try to get information from this guy, and when the guy won't give them information, they finish him off, and then they take his cell phone, and they're going to use the cell phone to kind of track where he came from. The cell phone information is given to Diaz, who can then track the background of it to tell them where to go next. So from here, we skip over to the laboratory overseen by bad guy Forrester again. He's talking to his boss, known as Prophet, as well as prepping the virus to be released. Here, we get another glimpse of the Russian kidnappee Ivanov as he is exposed to the zombie virus by Forrester, because he's finishing this business before he bounces out of this place. Switch back to Action Man Becker, and he's given the location of this lab as to where they need to go next. He assembles a team, and once they get to that location, the place is shut down and surrounded by cops. After getting clearance from the local authorities, the team goes inside, and they eventually find the body that Dalton and the medical team that she brought are going to examine. It is the body of Ivanov, because he is now a zombie. He also sort of offed himself by throwing himself at the glass window box that he was in, trying to get to the living people, and then he just kind of died from trauma, I think it was. So the three doctors go into this airlocked room so that they can start getting samples off of this body, and meanwhile, a bunch of zombies in the basement of the building are released because the whole thing was a trap set up by the bad guy. This is only made more confusing in this story, because in the previous scene that we got with Becker, where there was the caravan attack and the guns, where Becker ran around to the back of the Humvee to get the weapons, we were told that Forrester wanted Becker alive. But then, at this point now, just the very next scene, it's, I don't care if Becker is alive. And we didn't get any reason for that change, but it is immediately one event after the other. As you might expect, Becker and Dalton escape this building while their entire team that they went in with, you guessed it, dies. What is that, the fourth time? Is that the fourth time? That is the fourth time. We got the first Dame Donné, we've got Dalton's Dame Donné, we've got the Caravan Dame Donné, and then we've got the Laboratory Dame Donné. Great job. So Becker and Dalton escape via the roof because there is a helicopter that comes and picks them up and then saves them, and then they bomb. The helicopter bombs that laboratory as they fly away. Now, that helicopter is owned by Golovko and the Russians. So, yeah. Becker asks the Russian guy why he's helping them. Of course, he's suspicious. And Golovko is like, and Golovko is like, just trust me. Don't be so suspicious of me. If I wanted you dead, then you would be dead. But you're not. Theoretically, this is just a setup for the zombie virus being in that case, but it's never really seen, and we never see how it goes from that case to anywhere else, or what the scene literally has to do with anything else. And I will, we'll get into that as we get further into the story, because I was waiting for all of these pieces to connect, and none of them did. So the whole purpose of this flashback chapter in 1991 seemed to be giving Golovko a reference in the next chapter for when he info dumps about the plane crashing in the Soviet Union that was carrying the zombie virus. And during this scene, we also have Dalton asking, what does the bad guy want? And like the true badass action hero that Becker is trying to be, he goes, me. The bad guy wants me. But what does Becker have to do with the zombie virus? Like, nothing. The answer is nothing. Becker has absolutely nothing to do with the zombie virus. Vorster just has a personal vendetta against Becker, but it's literally nothing to do with the zombie virus or the Russians, so why it even comes up, I don't know. So now we switch over to Dalton's boss that she asked for permission from at the beginning of the book. His name is Kincaid. He also acts as a sort of father figure to her. I'm not really sure how that happened. It's not really explained how they built that relationship. It just sort of exists once she started working for the WHO, I guess. The two of them are checking out, Kincaid and his assistant DuPont are checking out the wreckage of the lab that Dalton and Becker had escaped from. He's concerned about Dalton's safety, and fortunately, just in that scene, as he's expressing his fear for her safety, she gives him a call and tells him that she is all right, she's with Russians, and she'll explain some things later. Now switch back over to the bad guy Vorster, who we are told knows where Becker and Dalton are, and it's time to move in. Switch back again to Becker and Dalton, where Dalton is asking Becker where he knows Vorster from. This is where it comes out that they used to be military buddies that worked together, and as you'd expect, Becker tried to put a bullet through Vorster's head because Becker kills everyone he comes in contact with, one way or another. I guess sometimes it's more personal. He explains that he did this because Vorster was involved in under-the-table dealings, torture, execution, kidnapping civilians, etc., all sorts of terrible things. And it's kind of hard to look at Becker like he's any different than Vorster when he's literally killing without hesitation and doesn't value human life, period. Like, he's killed multiple people now through his escapades of going to that warehouse, going to the laboratory, the caravan. He doesn't pause and think about any of it. Everybody is expendable. And we'll later see him partaking in the torture of Vorster to get information, and he has no problem with it. So his expressions of what problems he had with Vorster here to put a bullet through him do not make him look like a good guy. They make him look like a hypocrite, and he's a terrible person. The only reason that he's given an excuse is because we are told he's the good guy. But he shows no good guy characteristics. He shows no remorse. He shows no compassion. He shows no positive traits at all, except of fearlessness. But there's nothing that humanizes him. He's just a super soldier with nothing else going for him. The book tries to pretend that Becker is somehow more moral than Vorster, but we are not really given any reason to believe that. Becker further explains that he and Vorster used to be friends, and he shot the guy because he knew there was no legal way to get to him for the bad things that he was doing, so Becker took it into his own hands to figure out a way to get rid of him. This conversation is going on while Becker and Dalton are supposed to be going to a meetup spot where the Russians are. However, Vorster is also waiting for them there. Becker then sends in a remote car, and a showdown ensues with Vorster and his men, and Becker ultimately wins that showdown, where they then have Vorster kidnapped to get information from him about what the heck is going on with the zombie virus. They take Vorster back to the base camp, where they then beat and torture him for information. Yes, right after Becker just mentioned how he shot Vorster for doing the same exact thing and disappearing people. But he's the good guy, so it's okay. After beating and torturing doesn't work, Becker goes to Golovko to ask him to give a chance so that Becker can go and talk to Forrester, because maybe he can get different results if he just talks to Forrester instead. An appeal to Forrester's humanity eventually turns up results where Becker and all of them learn not only about the zombie virus, but that there is a current plan in place where 4 agents are going to the biggest airports around the world in order to spread the zombie virus. This results in everyone jumping into action in order to warn all 4 of those airports and try to locate the agents before the zombie virus can be released. Switch to the perspective of one of these agents at 64% of the way through the book for the sole purpose of telling you that the bad guy's motivation is that society is in general too populated and too decadent and disgusting, so people need to die. Yes, that's it. Not even from the actual bad guy. This is from a henchman of the bad guy, and somehow this is supposed to relate to the how does this relate to the Soviets? Just starve people. Anyway, it's a short chapter just to say that, because for some reason it needed to say that, and it couldn't or wouldn't have been said in another way, apparently. So then going back to Becker, Golovko says that he's returning to Russia, where they're going to shut down the borders and wait out the virus, and suggests that Becker and Dalton do the same. Go, be safe, don't fight the virus because you can't, but that doesn't sit right with Becker, so he's not going to do it. With that said, Golovko returns Becker and Dalton to their Turkish military base. In between the rest of the interactions of this book, there are jump cuts back and forth between some guy on that one guy on the plane that is the agent that is landing in London, where all it really adds is him thinking that the passengers are all disgusting and decadent and super fat and they deserve to die. Like, that's literally his only purpose. And then him picking up the luggage once he lands in London to go and set the zombie virus free. So that's all that he does. It felt like a movie cut. The whole rest of this book mostly felt like movie cuts going between 2 scenes that don't really matter, because you're not building a relationship, and it's such a generic thing to be like, oh, look, and the zombie virus is spreading in this airport with people that we don't care about. Oh, and there's Juliet. Who the fuck is Juliet? A random person, just like this random guy, Mueller, that is just on this plane to shit on people and release the zombie virus at 64%. This doesn't work in a book. You've already made me waste 7 or 8 hours on this. You can't. Building character and introducing character doesn't work the same in books as it does in movies. And this is just, there were points throughout the book where it felt like it was a movie script. This is where it got worse to the point of movie script, because there are just so many random characters thrown at you that it's supposed to be the climax of a movie where you're switching between all of these scenes where the tension is raising. But when you switch scenes like that in books, it lowers tension and you're confusing because you're putting so much emphasis on these people that don't matter. I will get to that, though. Getting back to the story. So we're sitting at the military base, and once Becker is introduced to and debriefed by Kincaid, Dalton and Becker go to sit at a bar and drink, watching the news spread about the shutdown of the airports in Washington and London, because the other 2 airports were saved. It was like Dubai and I can't remember the other place. The orders from the top say to keep what's happening a secret and to try to stop what's going on without anybody finding out, because they don't want to cause mass panic. While sitting at the bar, Dalton casually brings up her last job that she had, which was a position in Africa where she helped a man who a couple of days later turned out to be a suicide bomber who set off a bomb in a town, resulting in 6 dead. This caused Dalton to hit such a level of depression that she started cutting herself until she finally decided to try and kill herself. This is a 30-something-year-old woman with a PhD, presumably. Kincaid rescued her because he was around and already had affection for her and saw her lying dead on the floor or about to die on the floor because she was bleeding out. Rescued her, told her that she couldn't be on jobs because she needed to, recuperate because she was in such depression, until it came up to the more recent job here in Syria, and this was the first job that she had since trying to commit suicide. She says, I wanted to prove that I could still do it, but I guess I failed. You did. Because you lied. It's not even because of anything, but you lied and got more people killed. The worst part about the scene, other than, the really cheap thrust for emotional depth, is that there is no emotional punch to it. It feels out of nowhere, and it's really dumb. It feels like it was forced in there to attempt a character depth with Dalton, but it was so uncharacteristic and so unfitting of who she was and how she's acted that it really just made me mad. There was no lasting effect of this situation with Africa on her, or how it affected her when she got people killed in Hanada, or there's no survivor's remorse of getting past that laboratory. Like, there is nothing. When she cared about these other 6 people that she had nothing to do with, she directly got these other people killed, and there is nothing. So Why even bring up this situation where she thought that where she tried to commit suicide because she felt so bad, where she's had worse situations in the duration of this book and had no response? She didn't even think about it. She didn't even cry and go, I got those two guys killed in Hinata. They died, and they never come to her mind again. She just slaps Jacobson for surviving, for having the gall to survive her death trap plans. Like, freaking, are you kidding me? So instead, we have this superficial trauma that reads like an attempt to make you care about this character that you don't really care about because she's a useless twat girl boss. For the record, to people out there, trauma doesn't automatically make a character deep or make people care about your character. If you insert trauma into a character's background for the sole purpose of trying to make them more relatable or to make me go, oh, I feel bad for that person, I can't criticize them because they've been through something terrible. No, you're wrong. And it is a cheap trick to manipulate me by putting trauma on a character and then not using it. Like, not using it to build the character, to show the effects of that trauma. And I can tell when you very cheaply throw that crap on there. Like, screw you, it's so disrespectful. I cannot stand it. There are so many things I can't stand in fiction, and I'm coming for you for using this. And it just goes to show that this author does not understand emotional impact or trauma or how it changes a person or how a person copes with trauma because they don't know how to use it in their 19th book. It's not even a first book. Come on, bro. So Becker decides that he doesn't want to sit there in the bar and do nothing. He needs to warn people about what is going on and figure out how to stop the zombie virus so that the world doesn't die. He slips into the main part of the base where he attacks a rookie, steals his clothing and IDs, and bounces the heck out of the base entirely. He shows up at a Turk CNN office to give a private interview to a random reporter who, yeah, we also get another random chapter from her perspective just before Becker shows up. I don't know why we need this chapter that establishes who she is and like some of what her resume is before Becker shows up. But again, it's another situation where it doesn't seem like the author understands how novel structures work. For the duration of this book, I'm not going to be expressing like where all of the jump cuts are, but as I explain the whole rest of this book and what the, this climactic build toward the end, just imagine it constantly being interrupted with random scenes at an airport with people you don't know and don't care about, security guards, random passengers, freaking out about not being told what's going on, and it's all disrupting the flow of the rest of the book. And I wonder if that's on purpose to make you not question the lack of logic in the rest of this book. So while giving the live interview at the TV station, the military comes in guns a-blazing, which could have gotten everybody killed. Again, thanks, Becker. We know that you've got plot armor, but nobody else does. So literally every choice that you make is a risk to everybody around you. The military comes in, the interview is cut short, and Becker is arrested. Becker is then tossed into the brig for all of 2 seconds before Dalton comes to visit him, and while she's there, Kincaid comes in and sets Becker free, saying, I need you to come with me. We've got a situation in the phone room. Turns out his little stunt on TV got some random tribesmen living in the middle of nowhere in Russia to contact the military base because he was looking for Becker so that he could tell a story about how he ran into these weird mountain climbers 60 years ago, and something was off about them. Yeah, the kid from the second prologue is finally coming into play. This is him as an adult. But I have so many questions about how this setup works. Like, we're told that this guy lives in a village that rejects modernity. He embraces tradition. They don't usually speak English or Russian because they have no reason to. So how is he watching CNN Turk? How is he watching CNN Turk all the way in the middle of nowhere, Russia, and understanding the language that it was in? I'm sure that information has spread a bit from Becker's stunt on TV because that's how social media works and modern news cycles work. But it hasn't been that long either since he was on TV and then he got arrested. How is it international news on the scale to which it would reach a random tribesman in his local language out of the middle of nowhere of Russian society? How did this guy understand it? How did this guy know who or where to call in order to get a hold of Becker in the freaking Middle East? There are so many questions revolving the whole choice of this that it's just like none of it works. Because Becker doesn't have any reason to know Russian either. Assuming that the tribesmen knew Russian and so then saw it on Russian TV that this thing was happening and then called in and was trying to communicate with Becker, Becker has no reason to know Russian either. There was no explanation of somebody being in the room that speaks Russian. There was nothing. We're just supposed to assume that these two people from these completely random different situations just randomly understand each other with absolutely no difference whatsoever going on. And I say all of that because Becker gets into the conference room and this guy from the middle of nowhere is set up on a video chat to talk about what he saw 60 years ago. The logistics of how this works is all skipped over just so that he can exposit background information on you. Becker and Dalton are now sure that they know where patient zero is after listening to this guy. So they want to go to the Death Mountains in Russia, and the old man is willing to help them traverse the mountains to find the body in that cave. Oh, and another person getting involved with this dynamic duo, that means that this guy is probably going to die, let's be real, because everybody that touches Becker ends up dead. So Becker, Dalton, and Kincaid set up a flight to Russia without even checking with the Russian officials, mind you. Like, they know that the border is closed. They know that Russia and America do not have the greatest relationship. And instead of being diplomatic, they're sending military personnel on official business over into the Russian airspace without ever talking to the Russians. You're like, there's an international incident with the virus, bro, you're gonna cause another war. What is wrong with you? So then as they're flying towards the Russian airspace, they're getting a bunch of warnings from the Russians that say they don't have clearance and they will be shot down if they cross into the Russian airspace. Up at the last minute, Becker calls Golovko because he's got his number in his phone and says, hey, can you call off these planes? Golovko doesn't have that authority, and the only thing that he can do, and he even says this in the book, is that he can tell them to back off, but then when the Russian state finds out that he did this, he is going to be in trouble. Note, he is never actually in trouble for defying and undermining the Russian state and taking this into his own accordance, even though he doesn't have the authority to do what he does, and he even says that he will be punished. So the small group of four land on the mountains, and they traverse it looking for this cave that was mentioned at the beginning of the book. Eventually, by a sheer luck, they find the cave entrance, and I'm not joking when I say it is entirely sheer luck. It is actually kind of more like Will Jordan reached into his book and like put his ears up to Lori Dalton's ear and was like, psst, psst, Lori, see that boulder over there? Right over there, can you see it? That is where you need to go. Because this is what happens. They're walking on the mountain. Lori suddenly stops, and then she thinks about this ring that is hanging around her neck that is not mentioned once throughout the book, that could have been mentioned during the time in Hanada, because she's talking about this ring that has been passed down for generations, from her great-grandfather to her grandfather to her father. Every time they went off to war, they had this ring, and it always brought them home safe. And what a great opportunity it would have been to bring that up inside of Hanada when she's inside of the building, and the zombies are attacking the window, and she's like, I'm going to die, and she touches the ring, and she goes, please keep me safe, like you've kept everyone else in my family safe. And then Becker comes out of the darkness and helps her escape. Perfect moment to introduce that sentimentality and then bring it up again here and bring it up throughout as something that sort of is not a talisman, but has this feeling that you are safe and that you are part of this bigger thing. But no, this ring is first brought up at like 80% of the way through the book, and she's just thinking about her past and how it brought everybody else in her family home safe from war. And she closes her eyes, and then suddenly she literally just hears a voice coming from behind some rocks. And then she opens her eyes and she looks at those rocks and she goes, I think there's a tunnel behind there. I'm hearing things. Where does that voice come from? There's no explanation. There's nothing. It's literally Will Jordan inserting himself in here to be like, psst, Lori. There's no other explanation for that because it doesn't get explained. It doesn't come up later. It doesn't come up before. It is just in this moment because there was no better way to just figure out how to do this in character. I freaking hate when authors shortcut their own stuff because they are too lazy to figure out how to do stuff in character. Like, holy shit. Way to tell me to never trust anything that you do ever again, because any problem that you give your characters, you'll just solve by snapping your fingers. This whole time traversing the mountain, both Kincaid and the tribesmen have been having trouble from the physical demand of the hike, but they are still able to help uncover the cave. The tribesman says that he's going to stay outside while Kincaid, Becker, and Dalton go inside to investigate. Eventually, they come across the dip in the ground, and Dalton goes down first and finds a cave full of crystals and that dead girl, but her body is so perfectly preserved because it is so cold in here that she has never aged. She just and has never deteriorated. She just looks like a sleeping 14-year-old girl or something like that. Once Becker gets down there, it's explained that the cave has been closed off for who knows how long, allowing an ecosystem of unknown microorganisms to evolve in what knows what ways. And this was the beginning of the zombie virus for sure. So it had nothing to do with the Soviets. So why the Soviets were involved in this at all, I have no idea. So they go to collect the samples from that patient zero so that they can make a cure. Just as they're climbing back up the rope to get the sampling gear, they're betrayed by Kincaid, who is actually a bad guy and possibly British. Kincaid wants to murder everyone because, you guessed it, no, it's not because of overpopulation and decadence. He brings up 9/11 for no reason. It's just, my wife died in 9/11, so now I'm going to kill the world. So what was the crap earlier with the decadence and the overpopulation? What are we doing? What did Borster have to do with any of this? There is no connection between anything. After Kincaid's screed that it was his wife who died in 9/11 and this was his revenge, he's got his gun and he's got dynamite. That's right. He's got explosives. It might be C4. I can't remember exactly what it was. It doesn't matter. But he's got explosives that he's going to set off and kill them all, and he's going to give Lori Dalton a chance to escape because he does actually care about her as a daughter. That's what he says, so he's going to be like, you can go, but I'm going to end this all here, and the zombie virus is going to happen. Why it matters if he lets Lori Dalton go when he's literally putting a zombie virus out there to make everybody die, I don't know. There's no sense in that. Wouldn't it be nicer for her if you just kill her now short and quickly so she doesn't have to suffer through the zombie virus? There's a showdown between them all with Becker and Kincaid and Dalton, and the tribesman comes from the inside. Of course he gets shot because of course he has to die because he interacted with Becker. Becker body slams Kincaid and they fall into the pit, and Becker ultimately beats Kincaid, and then as he's passing out, he sees this red-haired ghost of a woman in the cave. And then he goes unconscious, and he's pretty sure that he's gonna die because he had some physical conditions happening to him and also falling down like that couple of stories into the pit. But his whole hope for Dalton is that even though they came here with a guide, even though they came here collecting all the stuff, even though Dalton will probably get lost and die in the cold trying to traverse back hours to the helicopter all by yourself because we're in the Death Mountains that require people to know where they're going, especially in this harsh weather. She's supposed to figure it out on her own. But that's what his plan is, his hope for her is, and he's pretty sure that she can do it because he's like, just leave me here, I'm going to die, just leave me, figure out your way on your own. And that's when the chapter ends. We go back to the airport after all, the back and forth, to a scene where some soldier is hanging over the girl named Juliet, who doesn't matter, and is like, everything is gonna be okay. And that is the end of the book. Well, technically, we have an epilogue to show you that Dalton and Becker are both alive over the grave of Patient Zero, saying, thank you for your contribution. And Golovko is there as well, so that you know that he was not punished by the Russian government for defying and undermining the Russian government. Yep, the book totally skipped the climax. The way that they got out of this was apparently just that because the Russians actually did know that they were there, then they sent some military in there that then caught Dalton and helped to escort Dalton and Becker out of there, and no hard feelings, I guess, for violating all of these things, and yeah, they created a cure, and that was all skipped over, and yeah, the ending of the story felt like the author didn't care, was a waste of time, and unbelievably lazy. But I can't decide who is more lazy, though, Grady Hendrix or Will Jordan, because the choices made in this book and Southern Book Club are so egregious to the reader. If you've got an opinion because you've read both, let me know in the comments down below, because I can't determine which is worse. But I feel like they've disrespected me and my time as a reader. Now that you know the story, and even though I've told you the whole story, I highly recommend that you go read the story on your own if you have any interest in it, to see what stands out to you, because the way that I cover the synopsis is going to be stuff that stands out to me and that I find important to move the story forward, and also be concise. So you might find different things, and you might not have the same problems that I had with the plotline. Now, that said, let's go into the discussion of some actual elements of the story. First is going to be characters. Mostly going to be talking about Becker and Dalton, since they are the central characters. I hated Becker, not because he's a generic action man hero, but because he has no moral code, and he thinks he is the coolest thing ever to exist. I wouldn't mind if he was kind of a dork with too much ego for his skill set, because he has been through 3 tours in Iraq, and so you're gonna have some sort of ego. He can also have a major skill set from everything that he's done, and then be a major dork, which is why he drops all those generic cliche action lines like, "To the chopper, lol, I have been waiting all day to say that." Like, yeah, nerd out. But the character was good at everything, got everything that he wanted, and had no morals. He went on 3 tours in Iraq and still didn't have enough thought to go slow or be careful when chasing down the bad guys, And so people that were his wards or his teammates all died. He got people killed again and again and again and never slowed down, never mourned, never reflected on how he might go about things differently to not let that happen again. Even the way that he went into the CNN Turk there at the end, he set up the entire studio to be wiped out by the military through his actions. Their guns were blazing. Being a killer that is good at everything is also not cool. You have to mix skill set with moral code or something to actually make you cool. Just being a badass is not just being fine with killing everyone and having plot armor to save you from consequences to your actions. That's lame. Not to mention that we get the backstory of Becker and Forrester where they were friends, but Forrester used his military connections to torture, steal, disappear people, do under-the-table stuff, and these were all things that Becker either actively participated in within the story, or he does as private security. Like his job with Ivanov could be considered under-the-table work. He also cooperates with Golovko and has no ill will toward Golovko torturing and nearly killing Forrester for information after criticizing Forrester for doing the same thing. I get that Becker was trying to work with Golovko for the virus thing, but at the very least, he could have had some internal reflection moments on his morals, on how he had to give up and not fight certain things in order to protect the people and for the bigger picture of things, and how that was hard for him. But we didn't get that either. We just got absolutely no reflection on any of it, so it was all just permissed. But also condemnation of this other guy that did the exact same thing. But instead, at the end, Becker just looks like a villain, no better than the men that he's fighting against, and the novel pits him as the action hero for no reason other than he is the main character. Also, he's invincible for no reason. I get that he's an action man character, so he's likely not going to die anyway, but you have him at like 30% being surrounded by dudes with guns, and he acknowledges that they won't shoot him, as he himself arms himself with grenades. What was the point of confronting him in general in that way if he was not going to be at risk of being shot? All you did was prove how toothless you are, and that there is no risk at all to this character for the duration of the novel. Moving on to Laurie Dalton as the leading female character, she was also a failure on this author's part. First, let's talk about how she is a girl boss, which I've already mentioned a couple of times. One line that she did say in this book was, "Goddamn arrogant man, just once would it kill you to admit that I helped you out. I am so sick of female characters that only ever insult the male character. I am reading a book right now, hello, Guns and Smoke, where the female character, every time she talks about her male counterpart, she has to insult him for literally everything. Oh, you don't know how to take off a safety in a Western dystopian as a farmer boy? Are you joking? Why does everyone keep doing that? And then you look at freaking, I also read The Breadth of Creation and The Height of Perdition, which are two books from a YA fantasy, from a sci-fi YA Christian romance thing. Also girl bosses that constantly denigrate the male character. So why are all of these right-wing stories also denigrating the male characters with their freaking girl bosses? I don't understand. Laurie Dalton smacks the military man for ditching her on a mission where if he hadn't bounced, he would have also died. She also runs off. She would have also died because it was because he ran off that they even had backup to escape that caravan ambush. And she also ran off in that situation and then went and hid in a building. So you wanted him to face the horde of zombies alone to help you, but you weren't going to contribute to that fight? Bite me, Laurie. She deliberately lied to her superior and put everyone in harm's way, getting at least 4 to 6 people killed over the course of a couple of days between Hanada and the Trap Laboratory. That also got her personal assistants from the WHO refugee camp killed. This becomes a problem later in the book when she says she attempted suicide after a terrorist that she cared about killed 4 people. This becomes a huge issue, as I mentioned in the synopsis, when she comes out later that she attempted suicide after taking care of a terrorist who later killed 6 people, and she felt the guilt as if she had done it. Not a single second is spent considering the people that she actually had a hand in killing because she directly lied and put them in situations that got them killed. I'd also like to bring up her family ring at this point, which could have been mentioned way back in Hanada, as I already said, and I'm not going to get into that super since I already mentioned previously, but if that family ring was so important, it could have been used as a device throughout the entire thing to connect family and legacy and remembering of those family and those sacrifices and how it stuck with her and the things that she learned from her family through the passage of that ring, where it's not really the ring that is saving you, it is the lessons that she learned from her family and from Hope and whatever else. But it's never brought up and it has no impact on anything. And again, it's another cheap attempt to pull at your heartstrings with something that this author does not understand how to do. The inclusion of both it and the suicide bombing that resulted in her attempted suicide, actually just destroys her own sense of character and any sense of guilt by not caring about anyone we see her actually kill. She is a stone wall that doesn't matter, and that is a lie that she tried to kill herself when that happened. Now, considering these are the two main leads and they suffer from the same issue, it leads me to believe that the author doesn't understand emotional depth, reaction, or trauma. Those are things that would be applied to characters in movies by the actors, but when you write a novel, you don't have the actors to ingrain that stuff into their actions. So you have to show it on the page with how these people respond to the things around them. Since the author mainly opines on movies and television, I just think that he doesn't understand how to write novels or prose or deep characters, which is fine. He's writing an action movie, but your action movie script sold in book form is missing half of what it needs to tell a satisfying story if you pretend that you can write a book as a movie script and just sell it all the same. In addition to Dalton's smacking of Jacobson, she also was never confronted by Kincaid for her insubordination that gets multiple people killed. Every single decision and deliberate disobedience is met with never being mentioned, and Kincaid is just glad that she's alive, even though she's killing people. I mean, I guess he does want people dead, so whatever. We're given no reason as to why Kincaid actually cares about Dalton and why he lets her not only break the rules, but gets people killed when previously he made her take a break after she attempted suicide. Where is the difference? Everything in this book is just because it works at the time. The characters have no reason, there is no depth to their choices, and the world ultimately doesn't feel lived in, even from chapter to chapter. It's just whatever is convenient at the time and hoping that you forget what was said by the time you get to the next bomb blast. There was a lot of potential in this book for interconnectivity and depth in the relationships of these characters, maybe even Kincaid finding comfort in Dalton shortly after his wife died, not as a lover, but as a girl that he could low-key unofficially mentor or adopt that became his daughter that he never got to have with his wife, and that's why he had a soft spot for her. But even his allowance of her to break the rules fell flat when 1, we got no reason as to why he cared for her, 2, no reason for why he let her go to Russia, and 3, no idea if he was using her or not. Kincaid wanted to claim that he hated society after 9/11 killed his wife, but he was giving Dalton a chance to leave the cave when he set up the explosives. Why? If the author had built out that relationship more between Kincaid and Dalton, then it could have shown how he saw her as a daughter and that she was the only thing that he saw hope in anymore. But none of the characters went on to have any level of an emotional depth because this was generic flat action movie that probably would have been a fine whatever for the Netflix catalog of generics if it had been a movie, but as a book, you wasted 9 hours giving me half a story that actually is a movie script because you don't know how to develop a book without actors doing the emotional work for you. I need authors to stop doing this, which leads me into the next point that I'm going to rant about. Scripts as books. I have read at least 5 or 6 of those last year. I am livid. Can you tell? I don't know what the motive is behind this, but this always is a thing people do, and I've mentioned it in a couple of videos before where I've done book reviews that kind of read like this. One of them is Dracula's Guest, one of them was Luck, one of them was Grady Hendrix's books, and I'm going to critique it specifically because I keep seeing it and it annoys me. People who obviously like movies and television, watch movies and television, don't have the funds to produce a movie or TV show, and then they go, I'll opt into doing a book because I can do it alone, yet they do not understand how the medium works. It is a disgrace to book writing. You should be ashamed. Because you don't appreciate when people half-ass movies, so why are you half-assing books when you don't even like the medium? Novels and scripts are different. They rely on different things to convey visuals and emotions, build character depth, change scenes differently. They take different kinds of time and energy to get through, and I'm getting sick of people thinking writing a book is the easy way since I'm poor or don't have friends. Then you give me a half-done project because you don't respect the format, you don't respect what you need to learn to give me the full product since you don't have friends to play the characters. The things that make it stand out the most are the lack of emotional depth, the pacing, the jump cuts, and the written-in-text director notes that are not prose. If you gave me a book, I could show you exactly what those are. Constant jump cutting works in movies because movies are made up of little scenes. It doesn't work in books because it throws the reader off and you keep changing the narrative perspective. Lines like these are all director's notes and read like you think that the reader's an idiot or you're writing for word count because you need to fill out your script so that it doesn't look like a script when you put it in a book. Here are examples from Dark Harvest. It was Becker's turn to grow more serious. The burly guard grunted, clearly not liking the situation. Becker asked, stalling for time, trying to keep him talking, trying to distract him. He explained, At length. At length, he explained at length was used a couple of times as a moniker instead of just like he said. What does that even mean? You're reaching for word count is what it means. There is no meaning to that. So stop doing this to me, please. Respect the medium that you are taking on or do not touch it. It is the same reason books get chopped up for movie format. They aren't the same. Learn the medium, write the fecking medium instead of giving me a 12-hour movie script and spitting in my face. And one last note on character. Ultimately, both of the main characters of this book are used to break all of the rules, don't care about anyone, and constantly get praised for it. Let's not forget every bad guy stroking Becker's dick, because why not? Yeah, they constantly compliment him for how smart he is, how strong he is, how special he is, because why not? Why shouldn't everyone praise the action hero just like every guy will praise the girl boss story where she dares to boss like a girl? Trauma dumping. As I mentioned during the synopsis, I'm getting sick of trauma dumping, where authors use trauma or bad things as a shortcut to try and guilt you into empathizing with their characters, but the trauma they put on their characters doesn't show in their actions, has no lasting effect, and is utterly meaningless other than my bad things happened, feel bad for me. This is cheap. This is disrespectful. If you're going to use trauma, then learn how to use it. And holy trash, am I sick of lazy people using trauma so carelessly in an attempt to emotionally manipulate me. No, your character saying she attempted suicide at 80% does not make me feel bad for her, because nowhere in the story does she actually show the emotional depth to go with that trauma. Trauma is not a shortcut to character development. Stop using it like it is. Marketing. On to something a little lighter. I went into this book knowing nothing about it. I didn't even know that Will Jordon was critical drinker until someone in the book club mentioned it. The cover of this book suggests that the story is set in Russia. It also suggests zombies. Both, to me, felt like mismarketing. This was more of a military story with zombies set in the Middle East. Russia doesn't come into play until a speedy wrap-up at 87%, and even then that last 13% goes between Russian mountains and the airport where the zombie virus is taking place. So barely any of this book is set in Russia that is not a flashback, and none of it has to do with the Ural Pass, because it's just a girl in a cave that could be any cave. It has nothing to do with the Dyatlov expedition. I don't know why the Dyatlov expedition was even mentioned in the blurb of this book, because it has nothing to do with the actual plot of this book. I honestly felt lied to when it came to the description and the presentation of this book, and there are a couple of reasons that make me wonder if this book was written as one thing and then retrofitted later to hit current topic trends in media. I have no way of knowing that, of course, but considering the Afghanistan thing was botched earlier last year and then Russia became the bad guy, I'm kind of suspicious where this is set in the Middle East and then Russia is just kind of shoehorned in there a couple of times where it doesn't matter and it could be taken out easily, and then this was published last year. Considering the prologues were literally unnecessary and felt like a completely different book. Dark Harvest also really isn't a fitting name. There is no harvesting going on. I don't know what the name is actually referring to. It's just nothing about the synopsis, cover, or title honestly feel like the way that this book actually is on the inside. Speaking of prologues, the prologues felt like they belonged to different books, and then you get past them after the first 10% of the book and you meet the main character finally, and that reads like also another different book. I still don't understand how or why the Soviets had anything to do with the gems in that cave. The Soviets literally had nothing to do with the virus. The plane crash in the 1991 flashback had nothing to do with the Soviets. It didn't say how that virus got spread. It didn't say what Ivanov had to do with anything. Just, this was a mess of everything in the kitchen sink, multiple ideas, none of them refined to connect into one coherent story, and the way Russia was used felt like it was written last minute. A couple of name changes, randomly tossed in the Ural Pass and the Soviets, I don't know. It's not that hard to just randomly throw stuff in for search terms, and that's what this felt like. Pacing. I can only care about meet the crew and they're all dead so many times. So many characters are introduced in a single chapter or a string of chapters, and none of them matter. This works in movies, it doesn't work in books. It's worse when your main character gets people killed, doesn't learn from it, and does it again and again. After 3 tours in Iraq. In the end, the climax makes no sense. It's rushed. The author even knows that he's running out of time, it seems, because he skips over the climax. So he either knows that he's running out of time or he had no idea how to finish up what he started. So he just skipped the main conflict of the book, the zombie virus, and just fixed it all and went to the happy ending. You can't even tell me it's because we knew how it'd go, because we also didn't need the useless scenes of pandemonium happening at the airport, but we still got those. So where are the scenes watching the conflict resolution and the characters that are the main characters who have been working against this actually solving the thing that they set out to fix? Oh, we don't get that. Instead, we get a fake-out death where it tries to make you think that Becker died. I knew that he didn't die and they weren't sitting over his grave, but it tries to make you think that they're sitting over his grave. So the book ends with the author pissing on your face, laughing at you. This is why you get 1 star. Motivations, character motivations. I know, I wish I was smarter in how I organized any of this stuff, but you just get the order that I write it in. So character motivations. Let me start with the dumbest perspective a soldier of 3 doors can have. Becker literally says that he has a moment of clarity unlike any other moment of his life, and he is willing to give up his life for another. This is in the cave at the end with Kincaid as he's fighting to save Dalton. Bro, your entire career has been sacrificing your your entire career has been sacrificing your life to save others. You're in the military. You are a field agent. What are you talking about? How are we here at 95% and you're going to tell me that your life has never been about sacrificing your life for others? Are you serious? So what were you doing? Were you a soldier for the glory? Other areas lacking motivation. We never get a reason why Vorster wanted Becker alive. It's plot armor to keep Becker out of harm's way in that one moment, and then it's gone in the next when they're like, well, he can just die now. Kincaid's motivations also don't show through in anything. He says that he's trying to stop Becker in every way that he possibly can, and he somehow failed by the time they got to the Russian cave, but he literally is the one that let Becker out of the brig to go and talk to the Russian guy. He could have said no to that random tribesman when he called in, saying, I don't trust you, you're an opportunistic old drunkard from the middle of nowhere in Russia, and then left Becker in the brig. So there was no reason for any of the last 13% to actually happen the way that it did if Kincaid was really the bad guy. Not to mention, where did the German guy being disgusted by humanity's fat decadence come from? That's not explained, it's just kind of thrown in there and never resolved since this is all from 9/11. There is no through line between those that Kincaid recruited and his actual beliefs and what is actually going on. We even got lines like Becker saying, I know what he wants, me. And we're never explained as to what it is Vorster wants. Other than, like, obviously we can conclude he wants revenge because Becker put a bullet in him. But why is Vorster working with Prophet? And then trying to specifically target Kincaid? It's different movies. We also never got any reason for why the Soviets were involved with the zombie virus. They were developing it, and then they were also the ones who were, like, locked down the borders so that we're safe. But Golovko just let Becker in after they were the ones designing the bioweapon. And Golovko is still alive at the end of the book after betraying Mother Russia and saying that there were going to be consequences to him allowing these American soldiers into the Russian airspace without clearance from the actual people in charge of the military. I can't help but feel like one of the failings of the plot and character sense is because it threw so much in that was nonsensical in an attempt to move things forward, but the author never stopped to ask why or how all of these characters or actions or ideas were connected. The book knew that it was doing too much, which is why it didn't bother with a real ending. It just said, lol, screw you, reader. I'm just gonna punt it home on this one. The tribesmen had no reason to communicate with Becker. We're told that earlier the tribesmen live in separate society from Russia and reject modernity. How did he see the broadcast? How did he view the broadcast? How did he speak to Becker or the military men? Was it in English or Russian? Why did the tribesmen know either of those languages? Did Becker know Russian for some reason? None of this is explained, and you're just supposed to go along with it and accept the communication that somehow happens and move the plot forward when it comes directly from the tribesmen, and then they're placed in Russia, and they're able to communicate with this guy. How? They never even stop when they land in the plane and the guy is there in his truck with his daughter. How is Becker communicating with this guy? Does he know English? Why does he know English living in obscure Russian tribe where he doesn't even speak Russian? Oh my gosh, do people even think before they publish garbage? So, we read this for Loinstream. And thanks to the Loin family, because certain people in the Loin family are so hilarious. You're missing out if you're not part of the Loin book club. But we came up with a better take on this book. A meme harvest. During the reading of the book, we made it better by changing almost every reference that I could catch to the zombie virus into the spread of a viral meme. People were rickrolling and TikToking and Tide Pod challenging and turning into influencers instead of zombies. Soviet Russia had been working on the ultimate minion Patrick Bateman meme. It was glorious and made the novel so much better than a generic zombie book that had little sense to it. Also, special thank you to Abigail from the Loin stream for suggesting Patient Zero be turned into Shit Poster Zero. That is friggin' hilarious. I can't wait to see what you create for your own work because you are really brilliant. You just gotta work on actually building your book together for real. That's where the magic is going to happen. So, my suggestion to the next person looking to write a zombie novel, please use memes instead. Create a viral story via memes. The world needs that as an official book. In closing, you might think so. I'm not mad, but you might think it, but I'm not mad. Okay, I'm a little mad. But I'm also disappointed by yet another book that doesn't seem to care about the craft or story or characters and wastes my time by not developing any of it. An ending like this book has is the author spitting in my face for giving him my time and money and skipping out on delivering. And it's especially disappointing from somebody who spends all of their time critiquing modern media and saying how much garbage it is. And then he goes and creates garbage because he can't be bothered to go and find fiction made by people that care about fiction that are not in the mainstream. Look, if you can't make art, that's fine. But don't go and call other people's art garbage and then present this where it has all the same problems because you don't give a shit about what you're doing. You just see an opportunity to make money. And I see you. And that's trash. It just looks like hypocrisy and a scam. But those are my thoughts. And I care a little too much about storytelling, if you can't tell. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thank you for sticking out with me through all of this. Hope to hear your thoughts. If you've read the book, if you haven't read the book, will you read the book? What are your thoughts on books that are written like freaking scripts? I am getting so tired of this shit. Like, holy... 2023 is year of the spice because I'm done with this bullshit. With that said, thank you so much. Have a great weekend and don't die.
Hello, boomers! My name is Yanananana. How are you feeling today? In case you didn't know, I'm a YouTuber from Nide, a small town in eastern Ukraine. My family has never really understood what I do in the woods, but all I've ever wanted is to make a better life for us all. Papa always comes home from the mines dirty, angry, and tired. It's a necessary evil to do your job and be in a place that you don't want to be. But I've never wanted to spend my life doing exactly what was necessary of me. Everything changed for me when a couple of Americans appeared at my door. They said they wanted to sponsor my channel and handed me military-grade explosives. Can you believe it? Military-grade. The lights will be incredible going forward. With this help, my videos will be next level. I just hope they are as they say, and this isn't some kind of trick. I mean, what would there be to gain? Boris says people are simple. Everything comes down to money and power. And Alex tells me ignorance will not save me from trouble. I understand where they are coming from, but I do not like to think that way. There is more to life than a cruel of superficial goods, hatred, and destruction. Anyway, I do not like where this video is going, so I will see you on the explosives field. Boom, boom, boom. Salute.